welcome to Cover Story. Today in Cover Story, we are going off track. We have a topic that is not political, but there are some ramifications, there are lessons to be learned. I'm talking about the case of Byju's. What are the lessons from Byju's meltdown? Now, this is a one-time startup that, it was the superstar of Indian startups, really, which is now a case study on how things can go so badly wrong. At one point, Byju's was valued at $22 billion. That is around 1,82,000 rupees. Today's valuation is below $1 billion. That is about 8,300 crores, sorry, both figures in crores. This is a company that had, Lionel Messi, that had SRK as its poster boys. What went so wrong? That is something I'm going to be discussing with my panel today, and the takeaways, for the larger takeaways for the, looking at the startups and what are the lessons that are to be learned. Joining me is Jaijit Bhattacharya. He is the President, Center for Digital Economy Policy Research, a think tank. Jaijit, if you can explain to our viewers, exactly what is on the table today, and, what happened with Byju's, what are we looking at, and the lessons, why are we taking it as a case study?
Byju's was one of the world's largest, if not the largest, edtech company, which came out of India.
Right.
And they started roughly around 2013. That's when they started pulling in money from investors. And when the COVID pandemic happened, that was a time when people really started taking up education online. And therefore, the valuation of Byju's shot through the roof. Over a period of 10 years, Byju's actually raised $5 billion in terms of investments, both in equity and debt. And to put a perspective on that, that's almost 1/3 of India's total budget for education last year.
Wow.
Right? That the central government budget was that much. So that amount of money was raised, which now stands to be almost zero, as claimed by the founder of Byju's. Which means that every year they burned some 4,000 crores for the last 10 years. And now we're in a position where there is no money left. This was disconcerting for the investors. This was also disconcerting for the entire startup ecosystem, because Byju's, along with a few other companies, were the poster boys of startup in India. So it's a huge concern that we need to know what really happened, why this sudden meltdown happened, and why there is no cash left in the company, as they claimed some time back.
So what do we know so far?
Then what happened is, suddenly there was a case against Byju's in the US, because they did not pay the interest amount against a loan of $1.2 billion that they took, which is about roughly 11,000 crores of money that they took as debt, and then they did not pay the interest on it. They were sued in the US courts, and those who sued them figured out that there was about $530 million, which is $500 million, lying in some shell company of Byju's. Now, this was something that was hidden from the investors. This was something that was hidden from everybody. And that became an issue of non-transparency. Now, if that money was hidden, why is it not being used to pay to the salaries of the employees? Why is that not being used to actually run the company, and why is it hidden in the first place? And that kind of demonstrates that there seems to be something systematically wrong in the governance of Byju's and its transparency, where the world's largest edtech company now suddenly has an existential crisis. And is that something wrong that the investors did? Is that something wrong in terms of regulatory structure? Is there something wrong in how edtech is operating in India? It opens up a whole bunch of questions that needs to be addressed and looked at if we want to continue to have a healthy startup ecosystem in this country.
So I want to get back to you. So is this, is it, as he's saying, is it peculiar to Byju's case because its lessons are only for startups, or lessons are for principles of corporate governance? It's not really applying to various startups.
I think very important point. It definitely is an issue of governance, because if you look at why investors are there, their money is the rocket fuel needed for startups. It's as similar to speculators are needed in the stock market.
Yeah.
If we don't have investors, we will not have the kind of startup economy that we have. Will not have the millions of jobs that it's generating. So they all have a very important role to play. And it's important for us to attract them, right? And we have our honorable Prime Minister going all over the world trying to attract investments. And those investments come in only when we have a very safe, strong regulatory system, a rule of law, and so on and so forth. And that's what we need to ensure at every stage. You go and put your money in the bank. Why? Because you trust the bank, right? Now, as Vivek mentioned, the investors also have the fear that what if my money is lost, right? And we know that out of 10 investments, 5, 6 of them are lost. Nothing comes back. And therefore, it's important that wherever they are able to get a return, they must double down on it. And that's what has happened. So if you look at the case of Byju's again, in 2021, they were asked for the balance sheet. Show me the balance sheet. They did not. For 18 months, they did not. Now, if you put in your money in the bank and say, what is my bank balance? And the bank says, I will not show it to you for 18 months, you get extremely worried. And when it came up, when finally that balance sheet of 2021 came up, their losses had gone up by 20 times from some 220 crores to 4,500 crores of losses in 1 year. Now, how did that happen? Why was it being put under wraps? Why weren't the investors being told about it? I mean, they put people's hard-earned money. It's not free money. It's hard-earned money of people who are investing through these investment channels. And therefore, it's very critical that we provide a safe pathway for the investors. So what happened is then the investors got together last month, in fact, a couple of weeks back, and they held an EGM saying that we have lost faith in the management, we have lost faith in the founder and CEO, and therefore, as stakeholders and as shareholders, we are voting them out. That went to the courts because Byju Ravindran, who is the founder of Byju's, challenged it, saying that because I did not attend it and because my board did not attend the EGM, so the EGM is invalid. And he took it to... Now, that's a question to be answered. Because what procedures have to be followed. Now, let's look at it from an ethical and moral perspective. The bulk of the shareholders, which is more than 60% of your shareholders, have got together and unanimously said that we need to change things, that we don't trust the founder. Now, if you're trying to find procedural ways of bypassing that mandate that has come from the shareholder, it is clearly ethically and morally not correct. And the Honorable Court will obviously take its view and will go into the details of the matter and see whether it's procedurally correct or not. Now, from the founder's perspective, I believe that they should have attended the EGM. If their shareholders have called for it, they are putting the hard-earned money. He should have been part of that meeting. Why did he not be part of the meeting? And if there is an ask for transparency for years, it's not just today, for multiple years. In fact, last year, in June, the topmost investors quit the board of Byju's. They were not getting the answers. So, there's Peak 15, there is Proceus, there is Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. They together have some 10-12% of the total investments into Byju's, and they quit the board because they were not getting the information. So if you're given a responsibility to be part of a board and oversee, but you're not getting the power to oversee, and power comes from the information is not disclosed to the board itself, then what's the point in having governance structures? What's the point in having a board? What's the point in having in all of these corporate procedures? And those were the deep lacunae that were there. And therefore, coming back to your question, is that there is a need to have some kind of a regulatory, some transparency, a stronger corporate governance, maybe strengthening the investors, because who's losing the most? Because obviously the parents are losing, the students are losing, but the investors are the ones who are really losing $5 billion out there. There's no trace of it. That money has vanished.
But, can we compare this with Bharat Pay? That is also something that went wrong over there. What went wrong and how were they successfully able to right it?
Right, I think great question, because Bharat Pay is also at some point in time a case of what should not be done. And it was pretty similar because there were founders and co-founders who had a different point of view of how to run the organization compared to what the investors were doing. See, also do keep in mind that the founders are heavily emotionally invested also into the company. They have put their blood and sweat into it. And they take the company from, let's say, 1 to 10. From 10 to 100, they sometimes may not have the capability. And therefore, the mantra really is that they should start leading from the back and get professionals in the front and take it forward. But sometimes they lose sight of that, right? And that's perhaps what happened to Bharat Pay. But what came out of Bharat Pay was that, again, there were governance issues. things about all the committees that Vivek mentioned, they were all there all the time, right? But if the data is not being shared with them, just as what happened with Byju's, then it becomes defunct, which is why the investors quit. That if you're not giving me the data, what is that am I going to audit? Right? I don't know your salary. I don't know anyone's salary. I don't even know how many employees are there.
Right.
Investors were not privy to that. So how does one audit any of this? So we know what happened with Byju's from the public information that is there. There was a lot of bad blood between the investors and BharatPe, and eventually the investors were able to take control of BharatPe in terms of management. And one of the co-founders had to exit. And post that, what we see in the 1 year from 2022 to 2023, they actually got their revenues increased 3 times. So roughly from about 300 something crores to 900 plus crore. That's a huge jump in just 1 year. More importantly, their expenses were brought down by 1/6. So from about 4,000 something crore, the expenses was brought down to under 900 crores. So which means they ended up being operationally profitable, right? Their revenues came up to above 900 crore, their losses came to below 900 crore. They were profitable in just 1 year, which clearly shows that the institutional investors know something. They're able to get the professional, into the organization and make it grow, and take it to a level which is helpful to the entire ecosystem. It's not just about the founders and the company, but it's about employees. It's about who they're serving. Every startup brings in efficiency in the economy. It brings in innovation in the economy. If at a certain time those startups don't grow, it's a loss to the entire economy. And therefore, it's important that we, enable the investors who got the most to lose in this case, right? To be able to step in and steer the company to the right direction. Perhaps that's what Byju's also needs. And just that level of transparency itself starts changing things. If you're questioned, you'll yourself start questioning yourself that am I doing the right thing? Am I looking at the right segment? Am I buying too many companies? There were 19 companies bought by Byju's all over the world, not just in India. It was bought in US, it was bought in Europe. Are those the right purchases? Does it align to the brand
with the
value?
education sector?
Well, largely, but a tenacious connect.
Okay.
If you are teaching nursery people and you're also teaching coding and then you're also teaching college student, it's a very tenacious connect. Don't go to Massachusetts Institute of Technology and say, can you teach me liberal arts, or can you teach me how to write essays? MIT is hardcore engineering, right? You don't go there for that. So every entity and every organization has a brand value. That brand has to permit it, right? And maybe it permits it, maybe it doesn't. But unless there are more number of people who get together and discuss that in a transparent manner, you will end up taking wrong decisions. And what seemed to be happening in Byju's, insofar as what we see from the public information, is that there seemed to be complete lack of transparency, which is what the investors have been saying. Now, if it is the other way around, then it is expected that the founders come in the public and then talk about it. Unfortunately, the founder is not even in India. He's not coming back to India. And that sends shockwaves through the investor community. And as I mentioned, investments are the rocket fuel needed to power startups. Without that, we will not have any startups in this country. And so we need to bring that transparency back into the system, the governance back into the system. And as Vivek mentioned, the rules are there for governance, but the transparency to back that governance was not present.
Any final word on the Byju's case? The topic is the lessons from Byju's.
I think there's a lot of lessons because, as Vivek mentioned, there is a question mark on whether investors will bet on the Indian edtech anymore. When investors come in, they look at the entire sector and say, yes, this country has a potential, education is needed, and that will grow very rapidly. And then they find a founder who seems to be able to understand that space and grow. And that's how Byju's happened, for that matter. They looked at the space, it made sense. They looked at the founder, who was a maths teacher, it made sense. But when you start growing, it seemed that the founder could not take the company beyond a certain level. In fact, the founder came back and said, we are now going to reduce the valuation of the company from $22 billion to $25 million, right? And then issue rights against it. And that means the entire $5 billion is almost to be written off, by the investors. that is not acceptable. Why will that be acceptable to anyone? If I take your money and I say now your money is worth nothing, and you have to now put more money into your previous money that you put in, that will not be acceptable to anyone, right? And such kind of behavior is harmful for not just the education sector but the entire startup sector, and it does not do well for India as a investment destination. And therefore, I think everything that we can do as a society and the agencies involved should do to make sure that companies such as Byju's come back on track, they again become profitable, that we are able to provide investor confidence, so that many more such startups come up which are able to grow. They get the funding to be able to grow. So we need to bring in that faith back into the system.
To give a happy ending to the story in the terms of,
absolutely,
not
like
just
BharatPe, I think excellent example. BharatPe went through a similar process and then they have a happy ending. They're profitable.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.